What's up, guys? Welcome back to Deck Tech for Decks, and again we are upgrading those precons. Now, this is going to be one of the only ones I'm switching out the face commander because Shalai and Hallar are just way better than the, face commander. Why do I think that? Well, to me, it just looks like a Perforos God of Fire with, 1/1 counter synergies. So now, whenever our creatures are entering the battlefield, we're going to make it to where we put a counter on them, basically making it to where we have Perforos in the command zone, which is already powerful in mono red. Now imagine you've got 3 colors to play with. That sounds pretty fun with me. Additionally, this guy's just kind of an infinite combo in the command zone. There's a lot of cards that just combo off with him. That's not going to be our main strategy, but hey, it is a plus. Additionally, we can use some fun cards this way, and while it would be fun to buff our commanders or our creatures to the moon with the other commander, I just think this is going to be a more solid choice and honestly just way more powerful. So let's get into these deck tech upgrades. Like all these precons, we're missing some card draw, so let's jump into what we added. Beast Whisperer is going to be super solid. There's a lot of creatures in this deck, so now whenever we're casting them, we're just drawing some cards. Contaminant Grafter. Now, this one might look like a weird choice at first, but honestly, she's got Trample. We're going to be able to get the toxic counter on our opponents pretty easily, and then proliferating after that is not going to be hard. Additionally, whenever we do proliferate, we're going to buff all of our creatures to the moon, making our commander do a ton of damage, especially since we do have a pretty go-wide strategy. Next up, we have Keen Sense. This is going to be super solid along with Snake Umbra. Both of these, whenever our commander does damage, we're going to draw a card. Notably, we can just put counters on a creature, deal damage, draw a card, and we can do that several times a turn, basically, drawing a huge portion of our deck and giving us the cards we need to win at the game. Rishkar's Expertise. This is going to be a Power Matters deck, right? We're going to be buffing our commanders up, or our creatures up, and they're going to get pretty big. So Rishkar's Expertise is going to be super solid here. Soul of the Harvest, same as Beast Whisperer, right? There's a lot of creatures in this deck, so just drawing cards whenever we cast them, super solid. Soul's Majesty, this goes hand in hand with Rishkar's Expertise, right? We're creating massive creatures, so 5 mana to draw 5 cards is a pretty good return and honestly better than blue. Now, let's get into those 1/1 counter synergies that are going to be insane in the deck. Avenger of Zendikar. Now imagine you get all of those plant tokens, and then every time you play a land, you're going to get 7 damage to throw at your opponents. And then, if you have a Fertilid on the battlefield, that's going to get even more insane because you can just get rid of Fertilid and throw some more lands onto the battlefield. Additionally, there's some fetch lands in here. So I think you understand this is going to deal a lot of damage over the course of the game on top of just having a massive board state. Khazar Ruthless Stalker. This one, whenever your creatures deal combat damage to a player, you're just going to go ahead and put a 1/1 counter on them. Notably, that's just going to add damage while making your board bigger. It's kind of like a two-handed category. We're going to create a big board state, and while we're creating that big board state, we're doing a lot of damage to our opponents, which is going to be honestly pretty fun. Defiler of Vigor, an all-star in the deck. Now whenever you cast a green creature paying for the life for the pip, you're going to add a 1/1 counter on your whole board, again buffing your whole board and then dealing a lot of damage equal to the amount of creatures you have on your board. It can be pretty insane, especially when you start chaining creatures together, and it can be, pretty lethal. Dragon Broodmother, another card that can present lethal pretty quickly in the deck, right? Because we're going to get a dragon on each of our opponent's upkeep as well as ours. So let's just say, hey, they've got, that Devour too. So if we get 1, 2, 3 dragons and devour 3 dragons with our 4th dragon that we get on our upkeep, that's going to be 6 damage to throw at our opponents. Pretty useful, especially when you can do that consistently. Evolutionary Sage, again, another solid one. We're proliferating whenever a land enters the battlefield. Again, with Avenger of Zendikar, super crazy. We just start putting lands into play, it gives our plant tokens a counter, then we proliferate them, and then we're just dealing a lot of damage to our opponents, right? I think you can see how this can kind of get insane. It's like a Perforos God of the Forge, but all your damage is in the 1/1 counters instead of the creatures entering the battlefield. So, it gets pretty crazy. Speaking of crazy, we have Herd Baloth and Ivy Lane Denizen. Now these two just go hand in hand because they go infinite together, and with our commander on the battlefield, we'll deal damage to our opponents, taking them out of the game completely. All you'll need to know is, hey, whenever that Baloth enters the battlefield, go ahead and throw a counter on Herd Baloth, putting another Baloth into the battlefield. And then you put another counter on Herd Baloth. I think you see where this goes. Herd Baloth is going to get massive. Our commander is going to do 1 damage for each Baloth, and we can create infinite Baloths, so we win the game right there on the spot. Master Chef. This is going to make it to whenever our commander's on the battlefield, all of our creatures enter with a 1/1 counter on them. So that's going to be super solid for that massive board state we're creating, right? Renata does exactly the same thing, but it's on a creature, so super solid. Turvagon. This is one of the ones that just creates a massive board state. This guy is trample. He has the Ravenous ability to replace himself. I love the Ravenous ability. Additionally, he's got 1/1 counters on him as well, so cast him for a lot. You get a lot of damage to point at your opponent, and then whenever he deals combat damage, he creates a lot of tokens, and hopefully those tokens are entering in with 1/1 counters. That way our strategy is working, and then our commander is going to do a lot of damage. Wildwood Scourge. Oh my gosh, this one doesn't look insane until you start playing with it, but you're going to put a counter on it for every counter you put on a permanent. That's not a Hydra, right? So if we have Avenger of Zendikar into the battlefield and 7 plant tokens, those 7 plant tokens get a counter. And then, why not just put 7 counters on Wildwood Scourge? So now our commander is going to do 14 damage to one of our opponents. I think you can see why this deck is going to get out of hand pretty quickly, and honestly, I'm here for it. Now, we did also have to add some removals, so let's go over what we added. We added Beast Within, because honestly, it's a super solid card, especially in green. You can get rid of any permanent, and honestly, it's really flexible. Blasphemous Act, another really flexible card. I've never had to cast this card for more than 1 red mana, so that's definitely worth an include. It's going to wipe the board and be a really solid reset. Azuri's Predation. I put this in the deck because honestly we're going to have a lot of cards that just add counters to our creatures, so just filling our board up with more creatures to add counters onto is just going to be solid for our commander, because like I said, whenever we put 1/1 counters on our whole board, we're going to deal a lot of damage. So that's the goal of this deck, so we've got a board wipe that synergizes with the goal of the deck. Next up, Colony Ambush. It's a land, super solid. You just cut a land from the Precon and now you've got a removal spell. I really like these MDFCs, especially because this one's like only 30 cents. Why not? Oh, 20 cents. And lastly, I just wanted to throw you guys a few non-budget cards that are going to be really insane in the deck. First one, we have the Red Terror. This one just goes infinite with our commander, and we're going to deal damage to our opponents till they're all dead. A super solid one, card combo with your commander. That's always dangerous. I don't really like running that, but hey, I thought I'd let you guys know because I'm a man of the people. Next up, Cathar's Crusade, another solid one that just buffs our whole board, especially when we have Cathar's Crusade and Defiler of Vigor. That's going to be disgusting and honestly take out our opponents pretty quickly. I think you can see why I went with this commander instead of the face commander. This commander just seems nasty and honestly pretty powerful. Now, let's get into those cuts, guys. Don't forget to subscribe. I'm going to do all 5 of these. I've already got 2 of them done. So, yeah, I'll see you when I do the cuts. Alharu and High Sentinel of Arashin. These cards do synergize with 1/1 counters, but that's kind of where their synergy drops, right? We're not giving 1/1 counters out at mass, and that's kind of why they saw the cut. Pride Malkin, while trample is pretty useful, we're trying to do most of our damage through our commander, and any damage we deal with our creatures is just kind of gravy. Slurk All Ingesting. Now this one does synergize really well with the commander, but I cut it because it only gives counters to creatures with counters already on them, so it doesn't help us in that aspect, and we really don't want our creatures dying, right? Additionally, the mana is kind of intensive, 6 mana for this, so that's kind of why it's solid cut. It's a late game drop, but honestly, late game we should have our engine already going, and if we don't, this doesn't help us get our engine going, so that's why I cut it. Sunscorch Regent. Now, I think there are faster ways to put counters on creatures, and the mana cost is pretty high up there, so that's kind of why I cut this one. Triskelion, again, high mana cost, it does deal some damage, and if we can put more counters on it, it can do even more damage, but that's not this kind of deck. This is really just a combo piece card. Inscriptions of Abundance, there's just way more efficient instant cards, so I cut that one. Mana Gorger Hydra, another controversial one. Some people are going to get upset at this one, but like I said, I want to deal I want to give out mass counters instead of just one here and there. I know this one does get really big really fast, but like I said, mass counters is the way I went with this. Restoration Angel. Now, this is really good with our other commander, but since we're not running them in the command zone, we went ahead and cut this one. Commander Sphere, there's just way more efficient ways to ramp in green, and for card draw, again, it's not that efficient. Abzan Battle Priest and Abzan Falconer. I've just never been a fan of these Outlast cards. They don't really give you counters at mass, it's kind of slow, and that's kind of why I cut them here. Flame Rush Rider, really solid if we have some big creatures to copy with this, right? Because copies of creatures do carry over with the counters. But if we don't, it's kind of a dead card, so that's why I cut it. Dramoka's Command, again, there's just way more solid removal and instant cards. Semester's End. I got rid of this one because I do see its usefulness, definitely in some decks, but if you exile a creature and then bring it back onto the battlefield, it's going to lose all of its 1/1 counters. Yes, this does put counters on them and protects your board, but like I said, it doesn't seem like the bang for the buck is there. There's a knight that phases out all your creatures that would be way more solid than this card. Genesis Hydra. In order to get your bang for buck, it needs to be late game and you have to have a lot of mana available. Early game, this guy's kind of a dead card, and late game, he can be pretty useful to get your key pieces, but I like cutting the cards that aren't very useful early game because that's where you really make your stride and really get ahead and start making your presence known, right? Brawn. I'm kind of scratching my head on this one. If you can get him into the graveyard, he gives all of your creatures trample, but there's not a lot of sack outlets in the deck, so someone would have to kill him, and I promise you I'm not killing Brawn on purpose. Flame Shadow Conjuring, another solid card for casting bombs, but the deck route we went was casting a lot of smaller creatures that slowly get bigger, and we're going to deal a lot of damage while those creatures get bigger, so that's why we cut that. Strionic Resonator is a solid cut here. While it really works with the face commander, with our other commander, it's not really that useful, so we cut it. Additionally, we are cutting a mountain because I believe 37 lands is the perfect amount as long as you include enough card draw, and we did pack this thing full of card draw. Next up, only cut these two cards if you include Cathar's Crusade and the Red Terror, Elite Skullguard, and Death Greeter Champion. I really think these cards are solid in the deck, but cutting them and making room for those better cards is going to be the right move, in my opinion. Now, notably, this is all opinion, right? I'm just some dumb guy on the internet giving you my advice. Feel free to cut, swap these cards out, take some of the upgrades, leave some of the upgrades out, and let me know why I'm an idiot in the comments below. Thank you guys for watching. I'm doing all 5 of these deck techs. Go ahead and subscribe if you haven't already, and as always, I hope this helped you in your deck building endeavor.